We have a half-quarter horse, half Arab here, and the lady that owns this horse said he's a very difficult horse to saddle, so we're going to look at him and put a Western saddle on him, show you how to saddle the horse. We've got a lot of drop to the back here. There's one positive thing about this horse, and that is that because his back is level and he has a fair width of shoulder, he should be easy to balance the saddle on. Most saddles should set on this horse fairly level and balanced. What we'll do to start with on the Western saddle that we show you putting on the horse is to use this Navajo pad. This Navajo pad comes with balance pads like you see here, Velcro together. So we could just use 2 layers of balance pads inside here if we wanted to. And you'll see that this unvelcros. We've made an even larger opening here so that this folds well forward when you unvelcro it. And that allows you to put your balance pads in here. I'm going to put the saddle on the horse without any balance pads and see how it looks. So we'll leave them out for right now. And in initially positioning the pad, you can really put the pad where you want your saddle. If you'll notice, this pad has a nice shape to it. It is seamed down the middle where we do not have any panels contacting the seam, and it fits the shape of this horse's back well. Since this is where we know our spring panel in the saddle should rest, we're going to put that right at the back of the shoulder blade, which is very easy to find on this horse. Find it blindfolded, you know. So it's just right here. And we'll put the saddle, because he does have a fairly prominent shoulder, we'll put the saddle right at the back of the shoulder blade. On our Western product and any of our saddles with a full leather skirt, such as a traditional, you can overlap the shoulder blade on a lot of horses by 1 inch or 1.5 inches. That is simply, in the most part, the leather at the end of the skirt, because the panel actually starts inside the leather skirt 1 inch back. So that's a little difference between the Western product and the English product, whereas the English product has a panel right there. So what we did is we put where our inside is the back of the shoulder blade, right here, like this. And that's, we'll go ahead and put our saddle on here now. Now what I'm going to do, I see a lot of people using a Western saddle, and if you'll notice where I placed this, I have about 1 inch of the skirt, which is the leather itself, in front of this black area on the pad that contains the balance pads. That means those balance pads are just about under the flexible panel. What most people do is to go ahead and ride a horse like this. If you do, you are pulling down very tight over these withers with a pad. Any saddle, and particularly in OrthoFlex where you have spring panels that place considerable tension against the sides of the withers, you should lift your saddle up here and you should stuff that pad up into it. And you want to run right down into the to put the pad up into the throat of the saddle. The way that we have made the latigo cinch setup is to drop down from the saddle. It comes down fairly straight from the saddle and, as you see, swings forward. When you put a little tension against it, it'll pull back straight, just minutely. When that happens, we loosen the rear of this yoke just a little bit, which keeps us from pulling the saddle forward as much. And the main thing in cinching an OrthoFlex is to go ahead and do it with quite a bit of tension. Come back and check it the second time and tighten it if your horse has breathed. and let out his barrel. So what we're going to do, instead of pulling straight up, you don't want to do that. You gather all the hair, you pinch. We're going to pull straight out. We're going to push against the horse. So we brace against him, and we don't pull him off balance. We pull straight out and really tighten this girth up all at once. You see how many holes I've tightened up on that? Most people would have stopped about 2 or 3 holes, probably at least here to here, before I did. Yet the horse doesn't have any problem with it. You see our withers that are very prominent on this horse are setting up in the gullet of the saddle. I can get my hands completely up under the pad in front, so I'm not going to pull down tight on these withers. And I've got a very secure saddle on this horse, whether I use this rear flank cinch or not. And you can see that in the rear we don't have quite the tension that we do in the front on this rigging. So that's why the rigging's shot forward a little bit. Again, after you've gotten on the horse, you could expect this girth to loosen a little bit, because right now it's what I would call bowstring tight. It is absolutely tight. That's as far as I can pull this out. But when I get on this horse, it will loosen. Just walking this horse around the arena one time, I think you'll find it's interesting to see that this cinch is no longer tight. You can see that we can pull it away from the horse some. It still has a little tension on it though. Oh.
Yeah, here.
Oh.
In fact, I could even come up and pull it for a spool.
See, the girth is no longer really tight like it was. By actually, I think you can get light there well now. The girth is no longer really tight like it was by actually over-tightening it the first time on the ground, which gave the horse no reaction whatsoever, because we're pulling a spring panel down onto the horse's back and shaping it to him. We can then go ahead and climb on a horse and ride and have the girth loosen to a really nice, snug tension. The thing you want to do is when you're riding, every now and then check and be sure that you don't have it just floppy loose. When you can pull it out more than 2 inches off the side of the horse without much pressure, then you're too loose. You really want to do this with a rider in the saddle that's at least your weight, so you can see how things are fitting. You can walk the horse out now. So we get our hand clear up underneath this saddle. And you'll notice we just have the one Navajo pad and fleece under the saddle. We don't want to use a whole lot of padding here. Everything's quite comfortable underneath there. And should not pinch your hand, should not have excessive pressure. If you can't even get your hand under there in the first place, it indicates a problem, particularly in front. So by doing that, you can easily tell if you have a real area of excessive pressure. Another thing, come here, Peter. Another good way to tell what's going on is where you can feel it directly. Put your hand, let's turn the horse this way a little bit. Put your hand up underneath there. This is the bar of the tree right here. This is what carries the weight from the tree. Now lean forward and slip it way up under there. Really push it under there. Then we will go ahead and pick the leg up on the horse, pull it out, and rotate the shoulder blade back. And if it pinches your hand, then you've got a saddling problem on your horse. It's a very quick and easy way to check for saddle fit, because if that cuts off pressure in your hand, it's also going to be doing the same to the horse. Did it pinch, Peter?
It didn't pinch at all.
He said it didn't pinch at all, so looks very good. Even though this horse has a relatively prominent shoulder, these flex skirts have flexed enough to allow that hand to go in there and the shoulder to come back and not pinch. Do you want to see the reactions of a horse that has discomfort under saddle when we go to put it on his back? Watch the horse. Watch him. He accepted it, but he didn't like it, and he knew it was coming, and he humped up his back in apprehension. And if he's comfortably saddled, that typically won't happen if he's really comfortable. Some horses develop a habit of this and may never lose it, and you may not find any soreness in your horse's back, but this horse, particularly when I first did it, really was violently apprehensive. The ideal for that situation is for that not to happen and for you to be able to set a saddle on there without a really big reaction from your horse. To go ahead and position this saddle on your horse, you want to find the bone that's in the shoulder blade by feeling for it, just like this. When we lose contact with this bone, and you see how deep I'm pushing in with my fingers, not straight, but simply feeling for the bone, and we lose it right here. It means we're going to have rotation back into here. That's why we extend these panels off the tree of the saddle, and why we have flare on the tree, is so that this shoulder blade can rotate under that tree without hitting it. So we can set this saddle up to that shoulder blade. On some horses that are very short-backed, run downhill some, you can have these panels overlapping that shoulder blade up to an inch. But you see what happened to this saddle when we moved it forward to the shoulder blade? All of a sudden, the front end set way up in the air. So if this is where the saddle simply insisted upon riding on your horse, is to pull some balance pads out of these booties that we have in here to balance the saddle a little better, because it's, by the time we get a rider's weight in, it's quite high in front, and it's simply not setting down well over this area. It would cause a little extra pressure in the rear for the saddle to ride this way because of the rider hitting the horse back here. We have a large area, and we don't usually see a problem with, quote, pressure soring the horse there. But the problem like in this horse is that if you get too far forward up here like this, which we see very often, you can really severely pinch that trapezius muscle. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the girth under here now, and I'm going to put the front strap in first. I'm going to buckle it up, and you notice I pull it out and up, and I pulled it up quite tight. People don't realize how tight that you have to get this, because if you don't get it tight, the saddle has this tendency to bounce on the horse. If you have it bouncing on the horse, it certainly becomes uncomfortable to him, particularly if it's a lightweight rider. You'll see this more than with a heavyweight rider. Heavyweight rider will set the saddle down on a horse quite well, but a lot of times a lightweight won't. Now, I'm not going to tighten it another notch right now because I think I've gotten it quite tight to start with, but we'll let this horse breathe a little bit. Many times you think you have it really tight, you walk off, your horse breathes, you get on, you settle the saddle down some on the horse and as well, and this is really operating quite loose. It's not too loose now. When we pull it out, we can pull it out, it has a little tension on it, and we know that when we get in, it will loosen more than this. And what I like to start out with is to go ahead and use the fingertips and check for friction soring. And then after that, we'll probe the horse's back, palpate it as you may, and use considerable pressure to see what's there in a horse. Linda Tellington Jones, I asked her, how much pressure do you use? Because I've had people that have been to her clinics tell me that I'm using way too much pressure and I'm going to sore the horse. And Linda uses as much or more pressure than I do, and her answer was as much as is necessary to see how sore the horse is. No, you're not going to hurt him. So starting out with the fingertips, we can simply run our fingers down the horse's back in this manner. We'll try to get him up on his hind feet here so we can get a little idea of what we have here. And what we can see is a horse that's sore on just one side in the loin. This is a very, very small amount of soreness from friction. It's very minor. It's a very minor reaction. Some horses could give you that much reaction, and I have to use quite a bit, see, to get anything. See, now we're really losing it now. So he's not really very sore at all. All it tells us is that whatever's happening with the horse, he's picked up a little movement here in the riding that he doesn't have over here. Minute, just minute, not anything that's going to hurt him. And so we really don't have a problem in that manner here. You will see when you run something down, you see the muscles down through here move.